If you like this episode, please click the subscribe button so that you are notified of future episodes. Please, if you haven't already, listen back to previous ones. You can follow us on Instagram, Threads, and X, formerly Twitter. Please drop me a message if you think there is something in particular I should cover in the future, or if you just want to chat about something covered before. So, all that's left to say is, I hope you enjoy the show. Every month at work, one of my colleagues brings in a copy of a local magazine. In this magazine are the horoscopes for the month ahead. I take it upon myself to read out the appropriate information depending on everyone's signs. I have to say that this is a highlight of the month for me. We have a good chuckle, especially if we don't read them until towards the middle of the month, and we can see how accurate they have been up until this point. This kind of foretelling of things to come is just one of many which people may use to plan or engage with future events. People have made a living from claiming to have the power to predict the future. Since the earliest times of civilization, people have used any number of methods, using a multitude of conduits, and to predict times of plenty and famine, wars and peace, love and enmity, or discovery and loss. These techniques, known collectively as divination, are often perceived as a branch of magic and are very well known today the world over. This is going to be one of those more fun episodes. By fun, I mean a lot less head-scratching on your part, and possibly a bit more confusion with the pronunciations of unfamiliar words on my part. I shall give a brief description of what divination is, a summary of the history of divination around the world, offer a brief detailing of some of the more common or well-known examples of divination, and finish with some of the more wild and wacky incarnations of the practice. With that, this is Cogito Ergo Pod. I am your host Daniel, and in this episode, if you hadn't guessed already, we're going to throw the runes and read the signs to get to the bottom of divination. The term divination is derived from the Latin word divirate, meaning to foresee, foretell, predict, or prophesize. Divination is understood to be an attempt to gain insight into a question or situation by way of an occult ritual or practice. Using various methods throughout history, diviners ascertain their interpretations by reading signs, events, or omens, or through alleged contact or interaction with supernatural agencies such as spirits, gods, godlike beings, or the will of the universe. Divination can be seen as an attempt to organize what appears to be random so that it provides insight into a problem or issue at hand. Divination is a universal phenomenon. It is found in virtually all cultures, and it was ubiquitous in the ancient world. Written evidence for divination goes back to the early 2nd millennium BCE in Mesopotamia and is attested to throughout the ancient world, primarily the Near East, Egypt, the Levant, Greece, the Americas, and Asia. The Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis was made famous when Alexander the Great visited it after conquering Egypt in 332 BCE. The oracle, Alexander's court historian alleged, confirmed him as both a divine personage and the legitimate pharaoh of Egypt, though Alexander's motives in making the excursion, following his founding of Alexandria, remain to some extent inscrutable and contested. The early Israelites appear to have been quite against divination. There are several references in the Hebrew Bible, namely Leviticus 19:26, and in Deuteronomy, which warn against their practices or consorting with those who practice divination. A well-known example of divination in the Tanakh can be found in 1 Samuel verses 3 to 25. Here, King Saul, the first ruler of a united kingdom of Israel, seeks guidance from God regarding the best course of action against a Philistine army. Despite several attempts using, in fact, forms of divination to communicate with him, Saul finds God unresponsive. Despite having driven all the necromancers and magicians from Israel, he finds and enlists the help of a figure known as the Witch of Endor. The witch summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who berates Saul for disobeying God and tells Saul that the Israeli army shall be defeated at the hands of the Philistines, and that he and his sons will be with me, Samuel, tomorrow. It all comes to pass as Samuel had predicted. 1 Chronicles 10:13-14 stated that Saul's death was in part a punishment for seeking advice from a medium rather than from God. In the book of Sirach, a deuterocanonical text, chapter 46 verses 19-20 tells a summarized version of the events, but makes no mention of the Witch of Endor. In ancient Greece, both oracles and seers were used for divination. Oracles were the conduits for the gods on earth. Their prophecies were understood to be the will of the gods verbatim. Because of the high demand for oracle consultations and the oracle's limited work schedule, they were not the main source of divination for the ancient Greeks. That role fell to the seers. Seers were not in direct contact with the gods. Instead, they were interpreters of the signs provided by the gods. Seers used many methods to explicate the will of the gods, including extispicy, ornithomancy, and others. They were more numerous than the oracles and did not keep a limited schedule. Thus, they were highly valued by all Greeks, not just those with the capacity to travel to Delphi or other such distant sites. The disadvantages of seers was that only direct yes or no questions could be answered. Oracles could answer more generalized questions, and seers often had to perform several sacrifices in order to get the most consistent answer. For example, if a general wanted to know if the omens were proper for him to advance on the enemy, he would ask his seer both that question and if it were better for him to remain on the defensive. If the seer gave consistent answers, the advice was considered valid. During battle, Greek generals would frequently ask seers at both the campground, a process called hiera, and at the battlefield, called sophagia. The hiera entailed the seer slaughtering a sheep and examining its liver for answers regarding a more generic question. The sophagia involved killing a young female goat by slitting its throat and noting the animal's last movements and blood flow. The battlefield sacrifice only occurred when two armies prepared for battle against each other. Neither force would advance until the seer revealed appropriate omens. Because the seers had such power over influential individuals in ancient Greece, many were skeptical of the accuracy and honesty of the seers. The degree to which seers were honest depended entirely on the individual. Despite the doubts surrounding individual seers, the craft as a whole was well regarded and trusted by the Greeks, and the Stoics accounted for the validity of divination in their physics. The divination method of casting lots, known as cleromancy, was used by the remaining 11 disciples of Jesus in Acts chapter 1, verses 23-26, to select a replacement for Judas Iscariot. Therefore, divination was arguably an accepted practice in the early church. However, divination became viewed as a pagan practice by Christian emperors during ancient Rome. In 692 CE, the Council in Trilla in the Eastern Orthodox Church passed canons to eliminate pagan and divination practices. However, fortune-telling and other forms of divination were widespread through the Middle Ages. In the Constitution of 1572 and public regulations of 1661 of the Electorate of Saxony, capital punishment was used on those predicting the future. Laws forbidding divination practice continue to this day. Divination was a central component of ancient Mesoamerican religious life. Many Aztec gods, including central creator gods, were described as diviners and were closely associated with sorcery. Tezcatlipoca is the patron of sorcerers and practitioners of magic. His name means "smoking mirror", a reference to a device used for divinatory scrying. In the Mayan Popol Vuh, the creator gods Ximocain and Xipiacoc performed divinatory hand-casting during the creation of people. Every civilization that developed in pre-Columbian Mexico, from the Olmecs to the Aztecs, practiced divination in daily life, both public and private. Scrying through the use of reflective water surfaces, mirrors, or the casting of lots were among the most widespread forms of divinatory practice. Visions derived from hallucinogens were another important form of divination, and are still widely used among contemporary diviners of Mexico. Among the more common hallucinogenic plants used in divination are morning glory, jimson weed, and peyote. India has a tradition of divination. Thyam in Malayalam is a process by which a devotee invites a Hindu god or goddess to use his or her body as a medium or channel and answer other devotees' questions. The same form of divination is called Arulvak in Tamil, another southern Indian language. In other parts of Karnataka, it is known by various names. In Nepal, it is known as Devta Ka Dami or Jakri. In English, the closest translation for these is oracle. The Dalai Lama, who lives in exile in northern India, still consults an oracle known as the Nechung Oracle, which is considered the official state oracle of the government of Tibet. The Dalai Lama has, according to centuries-old custom, consulted the Nechung Oracle during the New Year festivals of Losar. Although Japan retains a history of traditional and local methods of divination, such as Onmya-Odo, contemporary divination in Japan, called uranai, derives from outside sources. Contemporary methods of divination in Japan include both Western and Chinese astrology, geomancy or feng shui, tarot cards, I Ching, the Book of Changes, and physiognomy, methods of reading the body to identify traits. A common act of divination in Taiwan is called po. The po translates into English to mean moonboards. It consists of two wood or bamboo blocks cut into the shape of a crescent moon. The one edge is rounded while the other is flat. The two are mirror images. Both crescents are held out in one's palms, and while kneeling, they are raised to the forehead level. Once in this position, the blocks are dropped and the future can be understood depending on their landing. If both fall flat side up or both fall rounded side up, this can be taken as a failure of the deity to agree. If the blocks land one rounded and one flat, the deity indicates yes or positive. Laughing po is when rounded sides land down and they rock before coming to a standstill. Negative po is when the flat sides fall downwards and abruptly stop. This indicates no. When there is a positive fall, it is called sacred po, although the negative falls are not usually taken seriously. As the blocks are being dropped, the question is said in a murmur, and if the answer is yes, the blocks are dropped again. To make sure the answer is definitely yes, the blocks must fall in the yes position 3 times in a row. A more serious type of divination is kyo-a. There is a small wooden chair, and around the sides of the chair are small pieces of wood that can move up and down in their sockets. This causes a clicking sound when the chair is moved in any way. 2 men hold this chair by its legs before an altar while the incense is being burned, and the deity is invited to descend onto the chair. It is seen that it is in the chair by the onset of motion. Eventually, the chair crashes onto a table prepared with wooden chips and burlap. The characters on the table are then traced, and these are said to be written by the deity who possessed the chair. These characters are then interpreted for the devotees. Divination is also widespread throughout Africa. Among many examples, it is one of the central tenets of Serra religion in Senegal. Only those who have been initiated as Saltigues, the Serra high priests or priestesses, can divine the future. These are the hereditary rain priests whose role are both religious and medicinal. As late as the 1990s, African cultures were still performing and using divination within the urban and rural environments. Diviners may also fulfill the role of herbalists. After that whistle-stop tour of global divination, it would only make sense to look at a couple in more detail. I will admit now that I am not going to look at all of them, for to do so would take several episodes. I mean, seriously folks, there are over 100 different forms of divination. I will, however, give a brief description of some of the best known and tell you some of my personal favourites. This last bit should be heard as most ridiculous ones. So, let us begin. First off, we have tarot reading. Tarot is a form of cartomancy divination, the use of cards for divination. Tarot features trump card theme in a major arcana and smaller life details in the minor arcana. What does that mean? Well, each deck of tarot cards includes 22 major arcana cards. The major arcana cards represent the major themes and lessons of life, which range from strength and temperance to death and judgment. When a major arcana card shows up in a tarot reading, it indicates that an important overarching energy is present, as opposed to a more minor or mundane circumstance of life. A tarot reading that is full of major arcana cards means an important lesson or shift is happening. It means potential life-changing energy is present. The minor arcana work with a more short-term or momentary circumstances of life. Things like deception, collaboration, introspection, rest, or gratitude. While each major arcana card is unique, the 56 minor arcana cards are part of a repeating system. Like a regular deck of playing cards, the minor arcana cards are made up of 4 sets: wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. Understanding the element associated with each suit helps interpret these cards. In addition, each suit contains 14 cards, 10 cards in numeric order with an ace, 1 to 10, followed by page, knight, queen, and king of each suit. Tarot readings are done by yourself or by someone else on your behalf, and whilst there is a lot of mythology regarding reading themselves, it's a perfect divination tool to use to build on your knowledge across multiple areas, such as symbolism, numerology, color psychology, and so on. Cartomancy isn't just tarot, however. It can cover playing cards, Lenormand, oracle decks, affirmation decks, angel cards, and more. One which I mentioned earlier is scrying. The word scrying comes from the Old English descry, meaning to make out dimly or to reveal. Scrying is the practice of divining the future by looking into a reflective surface, such as water, a crystal ball, a mirror, smoke, fire, ink, or even oil in your palm. Methods of scrying often induce self-induced trances, using media like crystal balls or even modern technologies like smartphones. Nostradamus is probably the best known user of scrying as a means to see the future. An ever-popular legend associated with this practice is the tale of Bloody Mary and her summoning to predict the future. Possibly the most popular method of scrying is the use of a crystal ball. Crystal ball readings are done by gazing into a sphere made of quartz crystal. The ball is said to amplify your psychic abilities, allowing you to see messages from the universe more clearly. Most depicted in the media, it is perfect for those who love earth elements as well as water elements too. Tasseomancy is the art of divining the future from tea leaves, and is also known as tasseography. This is an ancient method of divination and one that is still widely used today. All you need is a cup of tea and some interpretation skills. Tasseomancy followed the trade routes of tea and coffee and was practiced by both Baltic and Slavic nations. It is closely related to the Romani people, whose nomadic lifestyle contributed to the spread of the practice. While tea leaf reading originated in China, likely soon after the creation of tea, various regions practice it with slight variations. Western tasseography can be linked to medieval European fortune tellers who developed their readings from splatters of wax, lead, and other molten substances. A way to boost this type of divination is to create a tea aligned with correspondences of where you would like to find insight further, such as using raspberry leaf teas if you're looking for insight into women's health. Additionally, coffee reading is traditionally practiced using Arabic or Turkish coffee, as they produce a very thick sediment. The coffee in the cup is consumed and the sediment is left to settle. There are several variations of coffee reading. They commonly require for the cup to be covered with a saucer and turned upside down. In the Turkish tradition, coffee readers often interpret the cup as being divided into horizontal halves. Symbols appearing on the bottom half are interpreted as messages regarding the past, and symbols on the top half are messages regarding the future. The cup may also be interpreted in vertical halves to determine yes or no answers, as well as the overall outcome of events represented by symbols. Astrology is one of the most popular modern methods that has origins way back in ancient times. The word astrology comes from the early Latin word astrologia, meaning a study of the stars. The word entered the English language via Latin and medieval French, and its use overlapped considerably with that of astronomy. By the 17th century, however, astronomy became established as a scientific term, with astrology referred to divinations and schemes for predicting human affairs. Many cultures have attached importance to events, and the Indians, Chinese, and Maya developed elaborate systems for predicting terrestrial events from celestial observations. A form of astrology was practiced in the Old Babylonian period of Mesopotamia around the year 1800 BCE. Chinese astrology was elaborated in the Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 256 BCE. Hellenistic astrology, after 332 BCE, mixed Babylonian astrology with Egyptian astrology in Alexandria, creating horoscopic astrology. Alexander the Great's conquest of Asia allowed astronomy to spread to ancient Greece and Rome. In Rome, astrology was associated with Chaldean wisdom. After the conquest of Alexandria in the 7th century CE, astrology was taken up by Islamic scholars, and Hellenistic texts were translated into Arabic and Persian. In the 12th century, Arabic texts were imported to Europe and translated into Latin. Major astronomers, including Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, and Galileo, practiced as court astrologers. Astrological references appear in literature in the works of the poets such as Dante and Chaucer, and of playwrights like Marlowe and Shakespeare. The Western astrology, which many of us will be familiar with, is a form of divination based on the construction of a horoscope for an exact moment, such as a person's birth. It uses the tropical zodiac, which is aligned to the equinoctial points. Western astrology is founded on the movements and relative positions of celestial bodies such as the sun, moon, and planets, which are analyzed by their movements through the signs of the zodiac, 12 spatial divisions of the ecliptic, and by their aspects based on geometric angles relative to one another. They are also considered by their placement in houses, 12 spatial divisions in the sky. Astrology's modern representation in Western popular media is usually reduced to sun sign astrology, which considers only the zodiac sign of the sun at an individual's date of birth and represents only 1/12 of the total chart. The subject of astrology would probably deserve its own episode, much like tarot reading, as there isn't just Western astrology, but also tropical, sidereal, Chinese, Vedic, Draconic, and more. The divination method can be used for yourself as well as for others through birth charts or current sky transits. The last of the mainstream divination techniques I want to cover in more detail is rune reading, also known as rune casting. Runes are a language where a symbol can represent a sound or a word or a theme. Popular forms of runes include Elder Futark, Ogham, and Younger Futark, and the majority of runes have their origins tied to Proto-Germanic culture. Each rune has a meaning and can be read in isolation or as part of a group to answer questions about your life. Rune stones can also help you get clarification or advice on how to address an issue or problem. The etymology of the word rune means secret, so as to practice for yourself. It has plenty of mythology and history to support a beautiful divination connection to the universe. I did find there is a handy WikiHow page explaining how to cast runes in 15 easy steps. So, if that's what you're into, just saying. Now that we have our more rune-of-the-mill divination methods out of the way, see what I did there? We can now take a more glancing look at some other divination practices. As I said already, there are over 100 of these, so I'm not going to go through them all. Instead, I will pick out maybe a dozen of those I think are worth sharing. First off, we have eomancy, divination by artificial intelligence, or AI. This one is obviously quite modern. Then we have electromancy, divination by sacrificing a rooster. It could also be understood as being divination by observing a rooster pecking at grain placed on letters of the alphabet and noting which letters the grain is eaten from. Note, the grain is replaced each time it is eaten off a letter. Anthropomancy is divination through human sacrifice. More precisely, through divination by the entrails of the sacrificed man or woman. Charming. Bumpology is the divination by bumps on the skin. Ceromancy is divination by melting wax, commonly done by melting wax and pouring it into cold water to see what shapes it makes when it hardens. Cephalionomancy, divination by, wait for it, boiling a donkey's head. This ancient form of divination used two different methods. One was concerned with the shape of the skull, the other involved heating the skull of the donkey or goat while reciting various phrases, often the names of criminal suspects. If the skull cracked or the jaw moved while a name was spoken, this was taken to indicate the guilty party. Kresnomancy is the divination by the ravings of lunatics. This, I think, is alive and well in some leading social media platforms. Tweet, tweet. Glosscopy is the divination by laughter. Labiomancy is divination by lips. Sexy. Logarithmancy is divination by logarithms. Not so sexy. Metoposcopy is divination by the lines on the forehead. This was particularly popular during the 16th and 17th century CE. Based on my forehead, they would have a lot to work with. Necromancy, divination by speaking to the dead or to corpses. Odysseus in Homer's epic Odyssey and King Saul's encounter with the Witch of Endor in the Old Testament are probably the best known examples of necromancy. Tomoscopy is divination through the interpretation of sneezes. Without a lie, I sneezed the first time I read this one. It's a sign. Slinianach. This is the divination by animal shoulder bones. Slinian is Scottish Gaelic for shoulder blade. This one is peculiar just to Scotland. Yes, a Scottish divination technique. Take that, Presbyterianism. And finally, rumpology. This is the divination by buttocks. performed by examining the crevices, dimples, warts, moles, and folds of a person's bum, in much the same way a chirologist would read the palm of the hand. The late American astrologer Jackie Stallone, Si's mother, claims that rhomboology is known to have been practiced in ancient times by the Babylonians, the Indians, and the ancient Greeks and Romans. Rhomboology can be performed either by sight, touch, or by using buttock prints. In addition to live readings, Jackie Stallone performed buttock readings using email digital photographs and had claimed to predict the outcome of presidential elections and Oscar awards by reading the bottoms of her two pet Doberman pinchers. She's a braver person than I. Okay, I may have covered 14 there instead of the suggested dozen, but the last two were a must. The history of divination is as diverse as the means in which we can divine. From the ancient Egyptians to Jackie Stallone, this collection of practices has covered many a millennia. Often seen as an occultic practice, divination is possibly one of the most popular esoteric subjects around today. You need only open a newspaper, and you may find your astrological horoscope printed there before you. The power of a crystal ball or tarot card can still have a massive impact on a person's life, whether they would be outwardly sympathetic to the reading or not. Many of the techniques found in divination are also still commonly seen in popular culture, such as books and films. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, Sauron is referred to as a necromancer. In Dead Man's Folly, Agatha Christie has a character pretending to be giving readings from a crystal ball. Tarot cards appear in Disney's Princess and the Frog, while again we find a crystal ball in the animated Robin Hood. Try as we might, and as hard as some people would try to convince us that it is satanic or evil, divination is ingrained in our society. Yes, most of us do not take it seriously, including myself. However, I am sure that many would-be detractors would feel some kind of concern if the Magic 8-Ball said that their outlook was bleak. Perhaps J.K. Rowling sums it up best with this quote from the fourth book in her Harry Potter series, The Goblet of Fire, found on page 201. "Oh, Professor, look! I think I have an unaspected planet. Look, which one's that, Professor?" "It's Uranus, my dear," said Professor Trelawney, peering down at the chart. "Can I have a look at Uranus, Lavender?" said Ron. If you have enjoyed this episode, please click the subscribe button so that you are notified of future episodes. Please, if you haven't already, listen back to previous episodes. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly Twitter. Please drop me a message if you think there is something in particular I should cover in the future, or if you just want to chat about something I've covered it before. So all that's left to say is, I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I shall speak to you again soon.